Ever notice how some people seem to navigate relationships with absolute precision? They know exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to make people dance to their rhythm. This isn't luck or charisma alone. It's something far more powerful. What if I told you that beneath every interaction, every relationship, and every power dynamic lies a hidden current? One that, once understood, allows you to influence any situation. This is the insight Machiavelli grasped centuries ago that still controls boardrooms, relationships, and politics today. People aren't moved primarily by logic or even by desire. They're moved by fear. The person who recognizes another's deepest fear holds the master key to their decisions, their loyalty, and ultimately, their reality. Think about it. Why does your boss micromanage? Why does your partner need constant reassurance? Why does that friend always one-up your stories? Behind these behaviors lie primal fears waiting to be decoded. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on this hidden language of influence. Not so you can manipulate or harm others, but so you can understand human nature at its core and navigate relationships with genuine insight. By the end of this video, you'll see interactions differently, recognizing the invisible threads of fear that pull people's strings. This knowledge transformed how I approach every relationship in my life. And fair warning, once you see these patterns, you can never unsee them again. Let's dive into how understanding someone's deepest fears gives you the power to reshape their reality. Number 1. The vulnerability map technique. Have you ever wondered why some people can read others like an open book? It's almost like they have a sixth sense about what makes people tick. The truth is, they don't have supernatural abilities. They've just mastered what I call the vulnerability map. Think about the last time someone completely overreacted to something you said. Maybe it was a casual comment about their work or a harmless joke that somehow hit a nerve. In that moment, you accidentally stepped on an emotional landmine without even knowing it was there. What if you could see those landmines before you step on them? Every person carries invisible emotional triggers, areas of such deep sensitivity that even the slightest touch can provoke an intense response. These aren't random. They form a pattern, a map that tells the story of their deepest fears and insecurities. Imagine having a special pair of glasses that lets you see these emotional hotspots in everyone you meet. That's exactly what this technique gives you: psychological X-ray vision. The key is to start noticing patterns. When does someone suddenly get defensive? When do they overcompensate with bravado? When do they shut down completely? These reactions aren't about you. They're revealing something much deeper about their inner landscape. For example, if someone responds with unusual anger when their ideas are questioned, you've likely discovered a fear node, perhaps a deep-seated fear of being seen as incompetent. If someone becomes anxious when plans change last minute, you've found another node, possibly a fear of losing control. This is point number 1 out of 5, the vulnerability map technique. Instead of just seeing behaviors at face value, start mapping the emotional triggers that reveal where someone's psychological armor is weakest. Here's how to put this into practice. For the next week, become a detective of emotional reactions. When someone responds with disproportionate emotion to something, whether it's anger, anxiety, shame, or even excessive pride, make a mental note. That's a point on their vulnerability map. Connect these points over time and patterns will emerge. Someone who overreacts to any hint of criticism, who constantly seeks validation and who brags about achievements, is revealing a vulnerability map centered around a fear of inadequacy. The power of this technique isn't in exploiting these vulnerabilities. It's in understanding them. When you know what drives someone's fears, you can approach them with genuine empathy rather than triggering their defenses. Imagine speaking directly to someone's core needs without them having to tell you what they are. That's the kind of insight that transforms relationships. You'll know exactly when to offer reassurance, when to give space, and when to challenge, all based on their unique vulnerability map. So start paying attention not just to what people say, but to how they react. The emotional hotspots you discover are the gateway to understanding their deepest fears, and ultimately, to influencing their reality in ways that serve both of you. Number 2. The echo chamber method. We all create our own realities without even realizing it. Take a moment and look around at your life, your friends, your home, your daily routines. What you see isn't random. It's actually a reflection of what matters most to you, including your deepest fears. This brings us to our second powerful technique, the echo chamber method. This insight might sound strange at first, but stay with me because it will completely change how you understand the people in your life. People unconsciously create environments that echo their deepest fears back to them. It's as if they're constantly checking, is my fear real? Is it happening now? They set up their entire lives to either confirm or disprove the very thing that terrifies them most. Let me give you an example. Have you ever known someone who constantly tests your loyalty? They might cancel plans to see if you'll still be there next time, or create small crises to see if you'll come running. This person isn't just being difficult. They've created an echo chamber for their fear of abandonment. Or consider the colleague who turns every project into a competition, who needs to outshine everyone, who works themselves to exhaustion. They've built an echo chamber around their fear of failure or insignificance. The beautiful thing about the echo chamber method is that you don't need people to tell you their fears. Their environment is already showing you. Their reality is literally structured around what scares them most. This is point number 2 out of 5. The echo chamber method. By carefully observing the reality someone has constructed around themselves, you can reverse engineer their core fears without them ever telling you directly. To use this method, start by asking yourself, what patterns keep repeating in this person's life? What problems do they constantly talk about? What situations do they seem to attract or avoid at all costs? The friend who's always in dramatic relationships isn't just unlucky in love. They may be echoing a fear that they're unlovable without drama. The boss who micromanages isn't just detail-oriented. They may be echoing a fear of chaos or failure. Once you understand someone's echo chamber, you gain an almost supernatural ability to connect with them. You can speak directly to their unconscious concerns in ways they've never experienced before. For instance, if you realize someone's life is structured around a fear of rejection, you can proactively include them before they have to ask. If someone's world revolves around a fear of being controlled, you can present options instead of directives. What makes this method so powerful is that the person will never know how you gained such insight. They'll simply feel understood at a level that creates immediate trust and rapport. Start looking for these echo chambers in everyone you meet. Listen for the problems they keep encountering. Notice the situations they repeatedly create. See the tests they unconsciously set up. These aren't coincidences. They are the architecture of fears that shape their reality. When you can identify someone's echo chamber, you'll know exactly what drives their decisions, their reactions, and their perceptions. And that awareness gives you the ability to speak directly to their deepest needs, creating a connection that feels almost like mind reading. Number 3. The shadow validation principle. Have you ever had someone see right through you? Not just understanding your words, but somehow knowing what you're feeling deep down, perhaps even better than you know yourself. That rare experience creates an instant, powerful connection. It's the feeling of being truly seen. What if you could create that experience for others? What if you could speak to the parts of themselves they're hiding, even from themselves? Every person carries shadows, fears so threatening they've pushed them out of conscious awareness. These aren't the everyday worries people readily admit to. These are the deeper, more primal fears that would shake their self-image if fully acknowledged. This brings us to our third technique, the shadow validation principle. This approach goes beyond surface-level understanding to connect with someone at their most vulnerable core. This is point number 3 out of 5, the shadow validation principle. When you validate the fear someone is hiding even from themselves, their shadow fear, they experience a profound psychological relief that creates instant trust. Here's what makes this so powerful. Most people are only addressing the surface concerns others are comfortable expressing. But underneath those acceptable fears lie deeper, more primal ones that actually drive behavior. For example, someone might openly worry about making a mistake at work. That's the surface fear they can acknowledge. But their shadow fear, the one they may not even recognize, is that they're fundamentally unworthy or undeserving of success. Or consider the person who claims they fear being alone. The shadow fear isn't really about solitude. It's about being fundamentally unlovable. The difference is subtle but crucial. When you validate only the surface fear, you get a polite nod. But when you gently acknowledge the shadow fear, the one they can barely admit to themselves, you create a connection that feels almost magical. How do you identify these shadow fears? Look for inconsistencies between what people say they fear and how they actually behave. Listen for emotional intensity that seems disproportionate. Pay attention to recurring patterns in their life stories. Once you've identified a shadow fear, validation is simple but profound. You don't need to directly name it. In fact, that often creates resistance. Instead, respond to it indirectly through your actions and words. For the person with the shadow fear of being unworthy, you might say something like, "I notice how hard you work to prove yourself, even though your talent is obvious to everyone around you." This acknowledges the hidden fear without directly confronting it. For someone with the shadow fear of being unlovable, you might say, "It's interesting how you give so much in relationships as if you need to earn people's affection, when who you are is already enough." The key is to communicate that you see their struggle without judgment. You're not trying to fix their fear. You're simply acknowledging its existence with compassion. When you validate a shadow fear, the person experiences something rare and powerful, the relief of being understood without having to explain themselves. This creates a psychological bond far deeper than agreement or flattery ever could. Start practicing shadow validation with the important people in your life. Look beyond their stated concerns to the deeper fears driving their behavior. When you speak to these hidden fears with gentleness and understanding, you'll create connections of extraordinary depth and trust. Remember, the most powerful influence doesn't come from manipulating someone's thoughts or emotions. It comes from making them feel truly seen, especially the parts of themselves they're trying hardest to hide. Number 4, the counterintuitive exposure strategy. Think about the most influential person in your life, the one whose opinion holds real weight for you, the one you turn to when facing your biggest challenges. How did they gain that power in your life? Here's something surprising. The people who influence us most aren't those who shield us from discomfort. They're the ones who stand beside us as we face our fears. This insight leads us to our 4th technique, one that might seem backward at first, but actually creates the strongest bonds of influence. Most people believe the way to win someone over is to keep them comfortable, to protect them from what scares them. But this approach actually limits your influence. True psychological impact comes from a very different strategy. This is point number 4 out of 5, the counterintuitive exposure strategy. Rather than avoiding someone's fears, carefully controlled exposure to what they fear, presented through your supportive lens, creates a powerful psychological dependency. When you help someone face what terrifies them, something remarkable happens. You become associated with both the discomfort and the relief. This forms an emotional imprint where they naturally turn to your perspective as their guide through uncertainty. Let me explain how this works. Imagine someone who fears public speaking. The typical approach would be to help them avoid speaking engagements. But using this strategy, you would instead encourage them to give a small presentation with your support, gradually building up to larger audiences. The key difference is that you're not just pushing them into discomfort. You're providing a framework for understanding and navigating that discomfort. You become their interpreter of the fear experience. This creates a unique psychological position. You're not just a friend or colleague. You become their guide through emotional territory they can't navigate alone. That's a position of tremendous influence. To use this strategy effectively, first identify someone's core fear. Then find small, manageable ways for them to face that fear with your guidance. Provide both emotional support and a perspective that helps them reinterpret the fear experience. For example, if someone fears rejection, don't just tell them everyone gets rejected. Instead, create low-risk opportunities for them to experience minor rejections while you help frame these experiences as growth rather than failure. If someone fears losing control, don't just tell them to go with the flow. Instead, create structured situations where they can practice flexibility within safe boundaries, with you as their anchor point. What makes this approach so powerful is the psychological transference that occurs. Because you were present during both their discomfort and their subsequent growth, they unconsciously attribute their expanded comfort zone to your influence. This doesn't mean manufacturing situations to frighten people. It means recognizing when fears are limiting someone's potential and offering to walk with them through those fears rather than around them. The emotional bond created through this process is remarkably strong. Think about the coach who pushed you through physical limits you thought impossible, or the teacher who challenged you to tackle problems you thought were beyond your abilities. Their influence likely remains with you even years later. Start applying this strategy by identifying one person in your life and one fear that's holding them back. Instead of the typical approach of helping them avoid that fear, find a small, manageable way for them to face it with your support. Be the person who helps them expand their comfort zone rather than maintain it. Remember, true influence isn't about making people comfortable in the moment. It's about helping them grow beyond their current limitations, with you as their trusted guide through the discomfort of that growth. Number 5. The reality framework shift. Have you ever tried to reason with someone who just couldn't see your point of view, no matter how clearly you explained it? It's like you're speaking different languages. In a way, you are. Each of us experiences reality through invisible filters, mental frameworks that determine what we notice, what we ignore, and how we interpret everything around us. These filters aren't random. They're shaped primarily by our deepest fears. This brings us to our 5th and final technique, the reality framework shift. This approach gives you the ability to communicate in ways that either bypass or align with someone's fear-based reality filters, allowing your ideas to be truly heard and understood. This is point number 5 out of 5, the reality framework shift. People's fears create subjective reality filters that distort how they interpret events. By understanding these filters, you can present information in ways that get through rather than get rejected. Think of it like this. Someone who deeply fears betrayal will interpret neutral comments as criticism, friendly teasing as attacks, and normal privacy as secretiveness. Their fear literally changes what they see and hear. Or consider someone with a deep fear of failure. They might interpret constructive feedback as confirmation of their inadequacy, opportunities as dangerous risks, and success as temporary luck. Their fear-based filter transforms the same reality you're seeing into something completely different. The breakthrough comes when you realize you don't need to change someone's entire belief system to influence them. You just need to present your ideas in a way that their current reality filter can accept. This isn't about manipulation. It's about effective communication. It's about speaking a language that can actually be heard. For example, if you're trying to propose a new idea to someone with a strong fear of change, don't emphasize how different and revolutionary your idea is. Instead, frame it as an extension or improvement of what's already working. Their reality filter will let that perspective through, while automatically rejecting anything that seems too disruptive. If you're giving feedback to someone with a deep fear of inadequacy, don't start with what needs improvement, even if you plan to end with praise. Their reality filter will magnify the criticism and minimize the compliments. Instead, establish their value and competence first, then present improvements as ways to enhance their already established capabilities. The power of this technique is that you're not fighting against someone's psychological defenses. You're working with them, presenting information in forms their mind is already prepared to receive. To use this strategy effectively, first identify the core fear driving someone's reality filter. Then ask yourself, how would this fear cause them to interpret what I'm about to say? What framework would make my message most acceptable to their current filter? For someone with a fear of loss, frame ideas in terms of what will be gained or preserved, not what must be given up. For someone with a fear of dependence, emphasize how your suggestion increases their autonomy rather than requiring support. Start practicing this technique in your everyday conversations. Notice how different framing leads to dramatically different responses, even when the core message remains the same. With practice, you'll develop an intuitive sense for how to present information in ways that align with someone's current reality framework. The most powerful aspect of this technique is that it allows for gradual transformation. By first meeting someone in their current reality and then gently expanding that framework, you can help them evolve beyond their fear-based filters entirely. Remember, the goal isn't to trick or manipulate. It's to communicate effectively across the invisible barriers that fears create. When you can do that, when you can speak in ways that actually get through rather than get rejected, you possess one of the most powerful tools of influence possible. We've covered a lot of ground together, from mapping emotional vulnerabilities to understanding echo chambers, from validating shadow fears to guiding others through exposure, and finally, to communicating through reality filters. These 5 techniques give you unprecedented insight into how fear shapes human behavior. But insight without ethics is dangerous. The power to understand someone's deepest fears comes with significant responsibility. Use these techniques to create genuine connection, to help others grow beyond their limitations, and to communicate more effectively, not to manipulate or exploit. What makes Machiavelli's insight so enduring is its fundamental truth. Understanding fear gives you access to someone's core motivations. When you can speak to those motivations with empathy and wisdom, you can indeed shape their reality, hopefully for the better. Start applying these techniques today and watch as your relationships transform. You'll find yourself connecting more deeply, communicating more effectively, and influencing more powerfully than ever before. Because when you understand their deepest fears, you truly do hold the key to their reality.